You have prepared for this moment for 12 years. The cell door just locked behind you. Welcome to Quiet History at Bedtime, a channel where history finds you in the quiet moments before sleep. This channel is still new, so if what you hear tonight stays with you, please consider subscribing, hitting the like button, and turning on notifications. It means a great deal. Everything you are about to hear is grounded in real historical fact, drawn from research and current academic understanding of the Tang Dynasty. Just relax and feel free to let this play as you drift off to sleep. Now, let us begin. Your name is Chen Wei. You are 26 years old. You are the eldest son of a family of minor landholders from Jiangling in the Jing region, 800 li south of the capital. The journey here took you 2 months on horseback, mountain passes still holding winter ice in the high sections, river crossings where the current ran fast and brown from the snowmelt, stretches of road that had dissolved entirely into mud and forced you wide into the fields alongside them. You have not committed any crime. You have done nothing wrong. You are here because 12 years ago, your father sat across from you at a low table by a window that faced a courtyard of 3 persimmon trees, and he told you that the brush was the only inheritance he could give you. He was not a dramatic man. He said it plainly, the way a man states a condition of weather. Your grandfather had held a minor official post, an administrative clerk in the county seat, before a bad harvest and a corrupt magistrate stripped the family of the land it had cultivated for 2 generations. What remained was the house, the persimmon trees, the books your father had kept through every difficult winter, and the conviction that if you could pass the jinshi examination, the dynasty's highest civil test, the family could begin again from a foundation that could not be taken away. That is why you are here, not for yourself alone. The weight of that is specific, and it does not need to be named again. You have carried it for 12 years. You know exactly how it sits. The year is approximately the 32nd year of the Kaiyuan reign period. The emperor is Xuanzong, a man who has ruled for more than 3 decades, and under whose reign the Tang Dynasty has reached what many in the capital consider its fullest expression: the largest city on earth, the busiest trade routes, poetry, and music at a level that scholars of the previous dynasty would have recognized as impossible. Chang'an, where you now sit locked in a cell no wider than your arm span, holds close to 1 million people within its walls and surrounding settlements. The city is divided into 108 wards, each enclosed by its own interior wall and locked at night by wooden gates that open again only at the morning drum. 1,800 li of imperial roads connect Chang'an to every prefectural seat in the empire. Along these roads, official couriers relay documents at 100 li per day. Merchants carry silk westward and return with lapis lazuli, cotton, glassware, and spices from lands whose names you know from texts, but whose geography you can only partially imagine. The examination system you have entered, the Keiju, the civil service examination that was codified under the Sui dynasty and expanded and refined under the Tang, is the mechanism by which the state recruits its officials. Hereditary privilege still exists. Men of powerful families can obtain court appointments through connections, and military distinction has its own track toward office. But the jinshi is the examination the dynasty respects most. The men it produces are the ones placed in the Ministry of Rights, the Secretariat, eventually the Chancellery. They draft imperial edicts. They administer the grain transport system. They negotiate on the frontier. They adjudicate at the county level. They are, in the formal understanding of the Tang state, the men most qualified to govern, not because of who their fathers were, but because of what they have proven they can do with a brush and a block of ink. This year, approximately 3,000 men have traveled to Chang'an to sit the jinshi. They have come from every corner of the empire, from the wealthy landowning families of the Guangzhou Plain, who are 3 days' ride from the capital, and from the river valleys of the far south that took months to reach. All of them have already passed the qualifying examinations. First, the county level test, then the prefectural examination administered through the governor's office. Only those who cleared both were granted the letter of qualification, allowing them to register at the Ministry of Rights and enter this compound. Of the 3,000 men in these cells, fewer than 40 will receive the jinshi degree this year. The rest will go home. Many will return next year. Some have been returning for a decade or more. There are men in this compound who have sat this examination 15 times. The poet Du Fu, whose manuscripts circulate through the capital's literary circles, and who is considered by many scholars of the city to be one of the finest living writers of verse, failed this examination 10 years ago and has never held office. His poems exist regardless, but his poverty also exists, and the two facts sit beside each other without resolution. You failed this examination 4 years ago. You were 22. You were not ready. You have spent 4 years making sure you are ready now. The cell measures 4 chi wide and 8 chi deep, close to your own arm span in width, and twice your standing height in length. You knew the dimensions before you arrived. A man at your guest house, who had sat the examination 3 times, described them precisely and without sentiment. In the days before the examination, you arranged your sleeping mat and your traveling trunk against the wall of your rented room, and worked only in what remained of the floor space. Not because you believed it would prepare you exactly, but because you needed to know what 4 chi felt like when it was real, rather than when it was a number. Preparation and the reality of a door closing behind you are different things. You know this now. The cell has a wooden plank against the back wall, your bed, and when you fold your knees and press your feet flat against the stone floor, your seat, there is a narrow shelf bracket above it, wide enough for a candle, your inkstone, and a stack of paper. The desk is a flat board set across 2 fixed brackets at approximately waist height when you are seated on the floor. It is not a desk by the standards of any room you have studied in, but it is level, and it is solid, and the surface will hold the paper without sliding. You set your bundle on the plank and begin to unpack in the order you planned 2 weeks ago. Brush case first. You carry 3 brushes, a large one for draft work, a medium one for composition, and a fine one for the fair copy. The large brush is new, purchased 3 days ago in Chang'an's Eastern Market for 12 copper cash. More than you wanted to spend, less than it would cost you to submit a fair copy written with a worn brush. Brush quality is not a refinement in the jinshi examination. It is a condition. The examiners see your characters before they encounter your meaning, and a brush that bleeds at the stroke's edge makes even excellent calligraphy suggest uncertainty. You cannot afford to suggest uncertainty. Ink stick next. You carry 2 wrapped separately in silk cloth. The ink stick is pine soot and hide glue, compressed into its rectangular form and dried for months before it reaches the market. When you grind it slowly against the stone with water, it produces a liquid that takes the paper cleanly and holds its edge without spreading. You have been using ink sticks since you were 6 years old. You know the weight of this one the way you know the weight of your own hand. Paper. 60 sheets of examination paper, pre-cut and stamped at the corners with the seal of the Ministry of Rights. The paper is made from mulberry bark, cream-colored, dense, fibrous, a surface that takes ink without bleeding and holds its shape in cold and humidity. The stamps are not decorative. Every sheet you receive is counted. Every sheet you return, written or discarded, must be surrendered intact. The stamps prevent substitution. A candidate cannot write a polished draft at home, conceal it in his bundle, and copy it onto the official sheet as though he wrote it here. This has been attempted. The guards at the gate know the weight and feel of a bundle that carries more than it should. Candles. 4 of them, stored in the corner of your bundle. You set them on the shelf in a row. You light the first from your flint case. The wick catches immediately. You hold the moment for exactly as long as it takes to confirm the flame is settled. Not superstition, but the acknowledgement that in an examination cell, a small thing working on the first try is the only kind of sign available to you, and it is yours. Outside the cell, through the thin shared walls on both sides, you can hear other men doing exactly what you are doing. The soft weight of a bundle being set down, the particular rattle of a brush case being opened. Once, from the cell to your right, the sound of a man exhaling very slowly through his nose. The sound of a person who has just committed to something and is trying to feel the commitment settle. The examination compound in Chang'an holds more than 14,000 cells arranged in parallel rows, each row separated by a stone corridor, just wide enough for a single guard to walk through without turning sideways. The corridors are patrolled twice an hour. At night, the guards carry paper lanterns. They do not speak to the candidates. They are not there for conversation. They are there to ensure that no paper passes from one cell to another, that no candidate leaves before the release bell, and that no one does anything that requires a report to be filed. You finish arranging the shelf. Your food goes in the corner. 3 rice cakes in cloth, a packet of dried salted fish, 2 pieces of pressed date cake, 3 days of food calibrated. Fresh food is not permitted into the compound. This is both a sanitation rule and a security measure, since hollowed-out fruit and vegetables have been used before to conceal paper slips inscribed with classical texts in very small characters. The guards who search the bundles at the gate know what a pomelo feels like when its center has been removed and filled with something else. They know the sound a rice cake makes when it has been split and resealed. You have brought nothing inside these walls except what belongs here. The topic will arrive through the slot in the door after first light. You do not try to sleep. You sit on the edge of the plank with your hands on your knees and breathe the cold air of the cell and let the night pass. The slot opens just as the light in the gap above the cell door shifts from black to the earliest pale gray of dawn. You hear the guard's steps in the corridor, slow, measured, unhurried. The sound of paper sliding through slots moves down the row. Yours comes through. You stand immediately. You read it once, then you sit on the plank and read it again. The assigned line is from the Shijing, the Book of Songs. The Shijing is the oldest anthology of Chinese poetry, a collection of 305 poems that scholars trace back to the early Zhou period and beyond, accumulated across centuries of regional culture and fixed into canonical form through a tradition of editing attributed to Confucius himself. The line you have been given is from the 42nd poem, Shan Zhan Zi Zhan, Bai Lu Wei Shuang. The reeds grow tall, the white dew has become frost. You know this poem, you have read it, memorized it, copied it out, analyzed its tonal structure, and traced the range of its classical commentary so many times that the characters exist in your hand as much as in your memory. The poem is about longing, about a man standing at the edge of water in late autumn, looking across the river towards something he cannot reach. The reeds and the frost are not landscape. They are separation made visible. They are the thing you feel when what you need is on the other side of water, and the water does not freeze. From this line, you must now build a regulated poem, a lushi, of 8 lines, each line containing 7 characters, in a tonal pattern that has been codified since the early Tang. Then you must compose a rhapsody in parallel prose and verse, often running to 300 or 400 lines, on a related theme. Both pieces must be submitted before the dusk bell on the second day. The lushi is the most formally constrained poetic form the examination tests. Every character in the Chinese language carries one of 4 tones, divided into a level category and 3 deflected categories. The pattern of level and deflected tones across each of the poem's 8 lines must follow a fixed schema without deviation. A single tonal error is grounds for immediate disqualification, regardless of the poem's other qualities. Beyond the tonal requirement, lines 3 through 6, the 4 interior lines, must form 2 parallel couplets in which each line mirrors its partner grammatically and semantically. A noun must face a noun, a verb must face a verb. An image from the natural world must be answered by another image from the natural world. The parallelism must be exact without being mechanical, and the content of the 2 couplets must develop the poem's argument forward, rather than simply restating it. You have composed hundreds of these poems. You know this form the way you know the inside of your own room, its dimensions, its particular silences, the place where the floor creaks. But knowing a form and inhabiting it under these conditions are different, and the difference is exactly what the examination is designed to measure. You set the topic paper down. You do not pick up the brush yet. You hold the image in your mind. Reeds, frost, the edge of water, late autumn, a man standing there, looking across. The traditional commentaries argue about who or what the man is looking toward, a beloved, a sovereign, a teacher long departed. You have read the arguments. You know the positions. What you need now is not the argument. It is the image that contains you inside it. You find it in your own situation. You are a man who has traveled 800 li to stand at the edge of something, not a physical river, but a test that divides what is possible from what is not, what you might become from what you will remain if this does not go the way it needs to. The frost is the cold fact of this examination compound. The reeds are the hundreds of brushes moving in the cells around you, all of them reaching toward the same shore. The other side of the water is the list of 40 names that will be posted at the Ministry of Rights in 10 days. You draft the first couplet in your mind before you touch the paper. You hold the characters in place, check the tonal pattern, adjust the 5th character in the 2nd line, a deflected tone where you need a level, and check again. It holds. You pick up the medium brush and begin on the draft paper. You work through the morning with the steady focus that is the product of years of practice, not inspiration but craft, the reliable application of things learned so deeply that they have stopped needing conscious retrieval. You cross out the 5th line twice. The 5th line is the opening of the 2nd interior couplet, and it must carry the turn of the poem, the moment where the emotional register shifts, where the image stops being external description and becomes interior pressure. This is the line the examiners spend the most time on. You know this. The knowing makes the line harder to write, which is why you must write it as though you do not know. The third attempt holds. You read the full draft from beginning to end. The tonal pattern is correct across all 8 lines. The 2 interior couplets are parallel. The turn in lines 5 and 6 does what you needed it to do. It opens without explaining itself. The final couplet closes without being obvious. You eat half a rice cake and drink water from the flask while the draft dries. In the corridor outside, you hear the guards twice hourly pass. His footsteps are measured and without urgency, the steps of a man who will walk this corridor for 3 days and has made peace with it. After he passes, the compound settles back into its working quiet. Through the wall to your left, you can hear, sometimes, the faint scratch of a brush on paper, a sound so small it exists at the edge of imagination, but you know it is real because you make the same sound and you know what it costs. The fu begins in the afternoon. A fu is a longer form than any single poem. It can run to 300 or 400 lines of parallel prose, sections and verse, discursive elaboration, all built around the assigned image and theme. The form traces to the Han Dynasty, more than 7 centuries before your birth, when the emperors of that era valued sweeping, extravagant verbal display in their court poets. The great Han rhapsodies, the Zishu Fu, the Shanlin Fu, are extraordinary things, excessive, deliberate, showing what language can do when it is asked to do everything. The examination fu is more controlled. It must demonstrate classical learning and compositional range, but it must also hold a coherent argument across its full length, and the argument must arrive at a conclusion rather than simply exhausting itself. You open with the image of reeds and frost. You build outward from that image into a broader landscape, the Wei River in late winter, the flat fields north of the capital in early morning gray, the sound of grain boats on the canal moving in cold air. You are not describing things you have seen. You are assembling images from the texts you have absorbed across 12 years of study, the landscape of the tradition as much as the landscape of the world. The Sheijing, the Chuchi, the songs of the South, the anthology from the Warring States period that gathers the poems attributed to Kui Yuan and his contemporaries in the southern kingdoms, a tradition whose imagery runs to orchids and rivers and longing for a sovereign who does not recognize virtue. The Wang Xuan, the 6th century anthology that your teacher, Master Guo, considered the single most essential reference for examination preparation, and that you have read in full more than twice. These texts are not decoration. They are the argument's bones. The examiners are not reading your fu to learn about reeds. They are reading it to assess whether the tradition is genuinely available to you, whether you have absorbed it deeply enough that you can generate new language in its register, not as imitation but as continuation. A candidate who has read the Chuchi and understood it writes differently from a candidate who has merely memorized it. The difference is legible on the page. You write through the afternoon and into the evening. The candle shortens. You light the second from the stub of the first. The compound outside settles into its nighttime quiet, the sounds of working having diminished, replaced by the measured steps of the night guards, and once, far away, the bell of a Buddhist temple in the city marking the late canonical hour. Your back aches. The floor of the cell is stone, and you have been seated on it for hours, and the cold that settles in the corners has worked into your lower back and the backs of your thighs. You straighten. You press your palms against your lower back and hold that for a moment, looking at the cell wall. The wall has marks on it. Not writing. Writing would be a disqualification offense. But marks. A carved line no wider than a fingernail. A smudge that might be charcoal or might be old ink. the ghost of a character someone began and then thought better of. These marks were not here when the cell was new. They accumulated examination by examination, year after year, as men sat in this exact space and thought whatever they thought in the dark between guard passes. The jinshi examination has been administered continuously since the Sui dynasty's codification more than a century before your time. That is 100 years of men in these cells. Some of them passed, most of them did not. The ones who passed are in the Secretariat, or in prefectural offices across the empire, or are dead now, their names on memorial stones, their collected works copied by students. The ones who did not pass went home and tried again or did not, and their names are harder to find. You return to the Fu. The closing section arrives in the deep quiet after the second guard pass of the night. This is the part of the Fu that cannot be planned entirely in advance. The preceding sections can be structured, outlined, developed according to a template you have practiced for years. But the closing section requires that the landscape turn inward, that the reeds and frost and water become explicitly a statement about the human condition, about the nature of effort and longing and distance, and what a man carries inside him when he stands at the edge of a thing that may or may not be crossable. This is the section that distinguishes the exceptional candidates from the merely competent ones. You cannot fake it by knowing the right references. You have to actually arrive there. You write the closing section faster than the rest, 50 lines of parallel prose that seem to move ahead of your deliberate planning, the brush going where the form has been asking it to go, the argument finishing itself. Your teacher called this the moment when the brush moves ahead of the hand. He said it happened when a form had been learned so completely that it began to generate itself. You have experienced it before in practice. You have never experienced it in an examination. You set the brush down. You read the Fu from beginning to end. You believe it is good. You cannot know whether the examiners will agree, and this uncertainty is a wall you have been pressing against for 12 years and will never breach before the result is posted. But sitting here in this cell, with the candle burning and your teacher's inkstone on the shelf above you, and the night city outside the compound walls, you believe the work is good. That belief is the only possession that is entirely yours in this moment, and you hold it without embellishing it. You copy the poem onto the official examination sheet first. The copying takes close to an hour. You use the fine brush, the one purchased specifically for fair copy work. The script required for the examination is the regular script, the formal, structured hand in which every stroke is discrete and legible, and the overall column suggests control rather than speed. Your calligraphy is one of the things you are most confident in. It is the first thing an examiner encounters when he lifts the paper before he has read a single character of meaning. In the jinshi examination, calligraphy is not a secondary concern. It is the frame of everything. The Fu takes longer. 412 characters in the final version, copied across 6 official sheets. On the 203rd character, you make a small blot. The brush catches a slight irregularity in the paper's surface and releases a fraction of extra ink. You hold the brush above the paper and look at the blot for a moment. The character beneath it is still completely legible. The blot is not large. You consider requesting a replacement sheet through the guard and then decide against it. A replacement sheet request goes into a supplementary record. A small blot does not. You continue. When the dusk bell rings on the second day, you gather the poem on top, the few beneath it, and the draft sheets counted and bundled separately, and you pass them through the slot in the door. The guard's hands receive them without comment. His footsteps move away down the corridor. You sit on the plank. The examination's first 2 sessions are complete. The work exists now somewhere else, in a stack of papers in the examiner's office, waiting for the blinded reading process, in which your name on the cover sheet is sealed away and a copying clerk transcribes the content onto clean paper so that even your handwriting cannot be recognized. The examiners will read your poem in a hand that is not yours. They will read your fu in a hand that is not yours. They will encounter only the argument, only the language, only the quality of the thought. You have done what you could do. This is the sentence that matters now, and it admits no expansion. The second night is harder than the first. The first night had urgency behind it, the topic newly received, the poem taking shape, the fu beginning to find its structure. The urgency kept the cold at a manageable distance. The second night has no urgency. The work of the first 2 days is done and cannot be touched. The work of the third day has not yet begun. What remains is the space in between, and in that space, everything you cannot control moves forward. You pull the robe tighter around your shoulders. The robe is padded with raw silk, not as warm as cotton wadding, not as warm as the fur-lined winter coats you saw on some of the wealthier candidates who entered the compound with servants carrying their bags. You know the difference between those coats and yours, and you have known it for a long time, and it is not useful to think about it now. You think instead about the policy question that will arrive in the morning. The third session of the jinshi examination, the CE, the policy essay, tests a different set of capabilities than the poem or the fu. The examiners are not looking for tonal precision or classical parallel structure. They are looking for a candidate who understands how the empire actually functions, who knows the names and jurisdictions of the relevant administrative offices, who can cite historical precedents for the management of real governmental problems, who can propose practical solutions that are grounded in precedent and calibrated to what is genuinely possible within the structures that exist. You think through what you know, the Grand Canal system and its maintenance requirements, the equal field land allocation system that has been the foundation of Tang agrarian policy since the dynasty's founding, and the questions some provincial administrators have begun raising about its continued effectiveness as the population shifts and the landed aristocracy accumulates more and more of what was designated public agricultural land. The border garrison system in the northwest, the jidushi, the military governors whose commands have been expanding in practical authority over the past decade as the frontier security situation has required more centralized military response. You stop there. You let the analysis go. You have done this work already. Everything that can be prepared, you have prepared. The rest will come when the question arrives in the morning, and it will either find what you have prepared or it will not. You light the third candle. The second has burned to its last half-inch, and the night is still long. You look at the thin gap above the cell door. Through it, over the course of the night, you can see the darkness shift through its various degrees. The full dark of midnight, the slightly grayed dark of the hours before dawn, the first pale suggestion of morning, Chang'an at night. Beyond these walls, beyond the examination compound's outer perimeter, the city's ward gates are closed. The 300 drum beats that mark the closing have already sounded. The 300 beats that mark the opening will come before dawn. Between those two sounds, the great avenues of Chang'an, the central boulevard that runs from the Mingda Gate in the south all the way to the Imperial City in the north, wide enough that the trees planted in its median look small against the space, belong to the city patrols who move through the dark with lanterns and authority. But the wards themselves, sealed behind their interior walls, are not silent. You cannot hear them from inside the examination compound, but you know they exist because you walked through them in the 12 days before the examination. You know that someone in a ward near the Western Market is probably still awake, practicing a zither passage in a room with a paper window, the music going nowhere in particular. You know that the monks in the Buddhist temple in the southeastern quarter are following their canonical schedule regardless of what any examination does or does not produce. You know that the Persian and Sogdian merchants in the Western Market District are asleep, or not asleep, conducting whatever private lives they conduct between the trading hours. You know that the city does not hold still for you in the trading hours. Chang'an has been a capital city in one form or another since before the Han Dynasty. What stands now was constructed and expanded under the Tang, laid out on a strict grid, with the Imperial Palace complex anchoring the north and the residential and commercial wards, filling the vast rectangle to the south. You walked the central avenue in your first days in the city, from the south gate all the way to the palace walls in the north, a distance long enough that by the time you reached the northern end, your feet were registering it. The scale of the city, experienced on foot, is different from anything a map communicates. The map is a diagram. The city is a thing you move through. You fall asleep before dawn. You do not mean to. You lie down to rest your back, and the exhaustion takes you before you have decided to permit it. When you wake, the third candle has burned to its base and gone out. The cell is dark. You can hear, through the wall to your left, your neighbor already moving, already at the desk, or perhaps he never slept either. You light the fourth candle. The morning of the third day, the policy question arrives through the slot just after the morning bell. You read it: water management in the Guangzhong Plain, the current condition of the Zhengguo Canal irrigation system, the flooding patterns along the northern tributaries of the Wei River, and proposals for improving the reliability of grain transport to the prefectural granaries of the north. You were prepared for this. You were not surprised. But there is a particular quality to the moment when the expected thing arrives and confirms that your preparation was correct. Not the relief of luck, but the quieter thing that happens when readiness meets what it was made for. The CE has a structure you know, open with a classical reference that establishes the historical background of the problem, describe the current situation with specific factual grounding, propose practical solutions calibrated to precedent and institutional feasibility, close with a statement of principle that connects the administrative question to broader matters of imperial governance and moral order. You open with the engineer Zheng Guo in the 3rd century before the Common Era, during the reign of the Qin state before its unification of the empire. Zheng Guo, a hydraulic engineer sent by the state of Han as a deliberate act of political sabotage, was commissioned by the Qin king to construct a canal redirecting the Jing River across the northern Guangzhong Plain. The intent of the Han state was that the enormous labor investment required by such a canal would exhaust the Qin's resources and delay its military expansion. The canal was built anyway. It watered more than 40,000 Qing of previously semi-arid agricultural land. The Guangzhong Plain became the most productive agricultural region in northern China, and the surplus it generated funded the military campaigns that unified the empire under Qin and then sustained the Han, and now, more than 900 years after its construction, continues to irrigate the land that feeds the capital and the armies that protect it. You are not explaining this as historical background. You are explaining it as the premise from which every subsequent argument flows. A canal built as a political weapon became the material foundation of an empire. The decisions made about water in the Guangzhou Plain are not engineering decisions. They are decisions about what the empire is capable of sustaining and what it will lose if the capacity is not maintained. The current problem, siltation at the canal's intake points along the Jing River, reducing effective flow to the eastern sections of the system with consequent reduction in irrigated acreage, is not a new problem. It is a recurring one, addressed and readdressed across the dynasties. You cite the Han administrative records that document the first major repair effort, and the early Tang repair conducted under Emperor Taizong's reign that you have read about in a memorial preserved in the official dynastic history. You describe the current estimated reduction in intake capacity. You describe the affected prefectures and their current grain supply situation. Then you propose a supervised dredging program in the canal's upper intake section, funded through a temporary relocation of labor obligations from the affected prefectures. This is within the existing administrative framework and requires no new institutional structure. A specifically appointed hydraulic commissioner reporting directly to the Ministry of Works, with authority to coordinate across the 3 affected prefectures, with a fixed term of 3 years for initial assessment and remedy, a revised maintenance schedule with annual inspection requirements, and a standing local labor allocation for ongoing silt removal, so that the large-scale crises requiring emergency response become less frequent. You are careful throughout to propose nothing that contradicts existing court policy in a way that could be read as criticism. The CE is not a platform for bold originality. It is a demonstration that you understand the limits of what can usefully be said, and that within those limits, you can think clearly and propose effectively. The examiners are not looking for a radical reimagining of Tang hydraulic policy. They are looking for a mind that can be trusted with actual administrative responsibility, a mind that knows the difference between what is ideal and what is achievable, and chooses the achievable without abandoning the ideal entirely. You close with principle that the management of water is not merely an agricultural question, but a matter of what the classical texts call benevolent governance, renzong, in which the ruler and his officials attend to the material foundation of the people's lives, because the stability of the people is the stability of the dynasty. The Zhongguo Canal did not make the Qin Empire great by accident. Someone built it. Someone maintained it. The continuation of that work is not a technical matter. It is a matter of whether the current dynasty takes seriously the obligations that the dynasty before it already established. You copy the CE onto the official sheet, 388 characters in the final version, written in columns slightly looser than the first day. The third day of close work always produces some loosening of the hand, but regular and straight and legible. When the final collection bell rings, you pass the essay through the slot. You hear the papers received. You hear the footsteps move away. You sit on the plank for a long moment, 3 days. The examination is complete. Everything you were capable of doing, you have done. The poem, the foo, the policy essay. They exist now somewhere outside this cell, in the hands of the examination office, moving through the blinded reading process, and there is nothing you can add to them, and nothing you can take back. You pick up your bundle, your brush case, your inkstone, Master Guo's inkstone, which you wrap carefully in the silk cloth and set at the top of the bundle where it will not be jostled. The 4th candle has burned low. You leave what remains of it on the shelf. Someone will use it. You step out of the cell. The corridor is narrow and full of movement. Men in examination robes, most of them carrying the particular quality of the past 3 days on their faces, slightly flattened, slightly dazed. the expression of a person who has been holding one thing in their attention for a very long time and has just been permitted to look up. Some move quickly, already aimed toward the compound gate and the open air. Some move slowly, looking at nothing in particular, letting their feet carry them in the direction of everyone else. The corridor opens into the examination yard, a long stone-paved space between the cell blocks, now filling with men gathering their things and moving toward the exit in the ordered groups the guards are directing. The sky above the yard is pale spring blue. The sun is low in the west but bright. After 3 days of candlelight and the thin gray gap above the cell door, it takes a moment for your eyes to find the full scale of the open sky. You stand in the yard and look up. The results of the jinshi examination will be posted at the Ministry of Rites in approximately 10 days. The names of the successful candidates will be written in red ink on white paper and hung against the outer wall of the ministry building on the street of the Vermilion Bird, the great central avenue where the candidates and their associates and the scholars and hangers-on of the capital's examination season will come to read. The names of the successful candidates will also be inscribed on a stone stele planted in the grounds of the Qian Temple in the south of the city. If any of those men become important enough later in their lives, scholars will travel for centuries afterward to find their names on that stone. You begin to walk toward the compound gate. The street beyond the gate is already busy with late afternoon traffic. Ox carts, a mounted official's escort moving at a trot. The continuous press of a city that does not pause. You stand at the gate for a moment before you enter it, before you let the city close around you again, and you breathe the air, which smells like cooking smoke and river water and cold stone, and you let the past 3 days exist inside you without trying to sort them yet. You let the past 3 days. Your guest house is 20 minutes north and east, in the ward adjacent to the Eastern Market. The 2 other candidates from the Jing region, men you met on the road south and traveled the last 10 days with, are waiting there or are not yet back from their own examinations. The Mingfa and Mingjing, which test legal statutes and classical mastery respectively, were administered in a separate compound on the same schedule. You will find out over dinner how they did, or how they think they did, which is not always the same as how they actually did. You walk. The city moves around you. You do not think about the examination. You think about dinner. The 9 days that follow are the most particular kind of waiting, not the waiting before something, which has urgency and forward motion, but the waiting after something, in which the thing is done and all that remains is for the fact of its being done to become known. You walk the parts of the city you did not have time for during the 12 days of preparation. The Buddhist temple complex in the southeastern quarter, which has a courtyard of old ginkgo trees and a covered walkway where monks walk at fixed hours in a silence that has the quality of practiced rather than imposed. The Western Market's outermost section, where the foreign merchants have their permanent stalls, men who speak Arabic or Sogdian or Tibetan, whose goods include things you cannot name in Chinese because they did not exist in China before the Silk Road brought them here. The Imperial gardens, visible over the northern palace walls, where the upper branches of what are probably apricot trees carry white blossoms despite the cold, visible and unreachable in approximately equal measure. On the 5th day after the examination, you go to the Kuijiang Gardens south of the city. The Kuijiang is a public lake in the southeastern part of Chang'an, surrounded by willow trees and walkways and covered pavilions, and during the examination season, it fills with the candidates who have nothing to do but wait. This is where the banquet will be held if the results go the right way. an official celebration in the gardens for the new jinshi degree holders, attended by high officials and by the poets and scholars of the capital who consider the examination their shared cultural inheritance. The tables will be set on the grass near the water. There will be wine from the western regions. The new jinshi will be celebrated with a kind of public attention that the empire's official culture reserves for very few occasions. You sit on the stone rim at the edge of the lake and look at the water. The water in the Kuijiang is still and cold. Near the opposite bank, a single white egret stands in the shallows, with the patience of something that has no reason to be impatient. The willows along the near bank are producing their first tentative green, the earliest color of the season, a color so light it could be imagined. You think about what you wrote. You run through the poem once, checking the tonal pattern from memory. It holds. You trace the argument of the fu from its opening image to its closing lines. The closing section is still, in your assessment, the best thing you have written in an examination context. Whether the examiners agree is not something you can know by thinking about it harder. You sit by the water until the afternoon light begins to thin and the temperature drops, and then you stand and walk back to the guest house. This is the practice of the 9 days. Walking, eating simply, sleeping in the thin way that comes when the body is tired, but the mind is still sorting things. The other candidates at the guest house talk about the examination sometimes, and sometimes do not. You notice that the ones who did badly tend to talk about it more than the ones who did well, or perhaps it is that the ones who are uncertain talk more, and uncertainty is the more common condition. On the 8th night, in the dim light of the shared room after the lamps are turned low, you think about your father. He has not slept well in 12 years. You know this because your mother mentioned it once, precisely once, in a letter she sent to you the winter before your first attempt, a letter that otherwise concerned itself with the household accounts and the condition of the persimmon trees. She mentioned it the way she mentioned the trees, as a condition of the present that she was reporting without emphasis. Your father does not sleep well. The persimmon trees produced less fruit this year than last. Here are the accounts. You have not written home since entering the compound. You have a letter half composed in your head, the one for each outcome, but you have not committed either version to paper yet, because committing it to paper while the result is still unknown feels like choosing one over the other. Tomorrow is the day of the posting. You sleep. The morning arrives the way important mornings arrive, ordinary, unannounced, preceded by the usual sounds of the ward waking up outside the paper window. You eat, you wash, you put on the formal outer robe that you brought specifically for this, the better of your 2 robes, the one that has been folded at the bottom of the traveling trunk since you arrived. You walk to the Ministry of Rites. The street of the Vermilion Bird is already busy when you turn onto it from the eastern approach. The morning light falls along the great avenue at a low angle, catching the dust the ox carts raise and turning it briefly golden. The willow trees that line the avenue are in their early green. You walk north along the eastern side. There are already men at the ministry building's outer wall when you arrive. Candidates, their associates, scholars who have attached themselves to the examination season, servants sent ahead by wealthy families to read the list and carry news back quickly. The crowd at the wall is dense near the center, thinner at the edges. You make your way forward. The list is written in red ink on white paper, hung flat between 2 wooden brackets. 38 names this year. Each name is written in the regular script used for official documents, large enough to read from several feet away. The list is organized by rank of performance, the highest at the top. You start at the top, you read downward, name by name. That moment, The one in which you find or do not find what you came 800 li to find belongs to you entirely. What it contains is not the stories to describe. The story has brought you to this wall, to this list, to this morning in Chang'an, in the 32nd year of the Kai-1 reign, with the willow trees in their early green, and the great avenue carrying its ordinary traffic behind you, and your teacher's inkstone wrapped in silk at the bottom of your traveling trunk at the guest house 20 minutes away. Whatever happens next begins with a letter. You already know what it will say. You have known in some form since you started writing it in your head 2 months ago on the road south, the road that was muddy and cold and took longer than you expected and delivered you here on time regardless. The letter begins, Father, the city continues around you. The great drum in the southern district will sound the ward openings in another hour. The ox carts will continue their routes. The monks at the Chen temple will walk the same covered walkway they walked yesterday and will walk tomorrow. The foreign merchants in the western market will open their stalls. Chang'an does not wait. It has never waited. It will be here, doing what it does, long after the stone that carries the successful candidates' names from this examination has worn smooth enough that the characters are difficult to read. You stand at the wall a moment longer, then you turn and begin the walk back. The city receives you into itself the way it receives everyone, without ceremony, without adjustment. One more person moving through the morning on the street of the Vermilion Bird, in the largest city in the world, in the dynasty at the height of what it would later be called its height. The willows are very green this morning. You walk. The sound of the city diminishes as you move into the quieter ward streets. The sound of your own footsteps on the stone becomes clearer. The robe you are wearing is the better one, the formal one, and you are aware of it against your shoulders. The morning is cold, but the sun is out, and where the sun hits the south-facing walls of the ward buildings, the stone is almost warm. You do not hurry. There is nowhere to hurry to. The letter will be written when you reach the guest house. The road home will begin when it begins. The 2 months of riding south are ahead, in reverse. The same mountain passes, the same river crossings, the same mud-turned roads where you will have to go wide through the fields. The persimmon trees will be budding by the time you arrive. Everything that needed to happen here has happened. The ward street empties ahead of you. The sound of the city has become a background condition, present, layered, continuous, the sound of a million lives going on in parallel with yours and without reference to it. You have been part of this city for 3 weeks. You are leaving it tomorrow or the day after. It will not notice either. The sun moves higher. The stone under your feet is familiar now. The particular grayish color of Chang'an's paving stone, which you know from 3 weeks of walking on it. You know the guest house is around the next corner. You know the landlady will be in the front room. You know the room upstairs where your trunk is waiting will have the morning light coming through the paper window in the way you have gotten used to. You round the corner, paper window, and the guest house door is open. The smell of cooking comes from inside. Grain porridge, something savory, the ordinary smell of a morning meal being made. You step over the threshold and into the ordinary day that waits on the other side of the door. The letter will be brief. It will say everything it needs to say in the first sentence, and the rest will be details. Your father will read the first sentence and set the letter down, and he will sit for a moment at the table by the window that faces the persimmon trees, and whatever he feels in that moment is his. You sit down at the small desk in the corner of the room. You take out a sheet of paper. You take out the brush. You grind the ink slowly, the way you were taught, in small circular strokes against the stone. The stone is your teacher's. It has been worn smooth in the center from years of use, a shallow concave surface where the ink pools naturally. You know the feeling of it under your palm. You have known it for years. Outside the window, in the ward beyond the guest house, something shifts. A cart passing, a door closing somewhere, a sound of children at the far end of the street, the ordinary continuing sounds of a city that was here before you and will be here after. You set the brush against the paper. You begin. Thank you for spending this night in Tang Dynasty Chang'an. Everything you heard tonight is drawn from real historical records. The cell dimensions of the examination compound, the structure of the jinshi test and its 3 sessions, the population of Chang'an under Emperor Shanzong, the Zhengguo Canal and its 900-year history, the forms of the Lushi and Fu poems, the Kuishang Gardens, and the red ink name list posted at the Ministry of Rights. The men who sat in those cells, the ones whose names ended up on the stone at the Qian Temple, and the ones whose names did not, were real people in a real city, doing the most consequential thing they had been trained to do. This channel is still finding its way. If tonight's story helped you rest, a like, a subscription, and a turned-on notification bell mean more than you might think. We will be back soon with another quiet moment from history. Sleep well.